that test, we finished 5th chapter. We already completed 4 chapters earlier. Of course, we could do it again because many people are not here. And we're there. But anyway, that's nothing. Then today we will discuss this text number 5, chapter 6. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Okay, those who have a soft copy of this, maybe they can share. Who has the soft copy?
Yeah.
Sagar, you have the soft copy. Yeah. Can you immediately send them? They can follow on their mobile. Send a WhatsApp message or something. Or they can share the printouts. Okay. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Vishtam Stavitam Yena Bhutale Swam Rupa Kada Mayam Radati Swaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shutra Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sarvetam Sagadutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kantarada Kantanamastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangira Devi Vrindavaneshwari Vishvanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriya Vanchakalpataru Vyascha Krivasindhu Vyayevacha Adidanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. You ready for test?
Oh,
you've prepared? That's why you came. If you wouldn't forget, so now what?
I will. Oh.
You can't go now. Now, wait. You have the... Tiger, can you send... What's your name? Yogesh, okay. You know him? Yeah. Okay. Udarit Atmanatmanam Natmanam Avasadayit Atmaivahyatmano Bandhu Atmaivaripur Atmanaha. So translation. This is one of the major verses of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. It's just like very known verse, important verse. It says that one must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. So, nothing in this world is good or bad in itself. But how we use that determines how it is going to affect us. Right? If I take anything, okay, name anything. Any object, any laptop. Okay, laptop. Car, you want car, I know. Car or laptop. I mean laptop, you can misuse laptop. You can watch so many bad things on laptop, right? And then you say laptop is bad. But is laptop bad? No, we are misusing it. Car also, you can do so many nonsense things with the car. Car, when you say car, I remember now first flash that came to my mind was in Gokarna, when we were swimming in the ocean. I mean ocean, sea there. It's ocean. And that fellow with this whatever. What's that called? Speedboat.
Water scooter.
Water nonsense, but there it is. And amongst the people doing all kinds of nonsense things, really, that's so disturbing. That's such a misuse. Such a misuse. What to do? So anyway, nothing in itself is good or bad. It's how we use it or misuse it. So in a similar way, the mind can help us a lot, but it can give us hell. It said that mind can make the hell of heaven and heaven out of hell. It's just the mind. It's just that particular impression and perception that one's mind is conditioned to, and that's what it projects onto anything. But that something doesn't necessarily have to be good or bad. It's just that projection that one has within one mind. How the mind is trained, how the mind is, you may say, colored, how the mind is conditioned, how the mind is programmed, and then mind projects this. That's it, and then that's what reflection comes. That's what we get. So mind is not necessarily a negative thing. As it said, Krishna is saying here, he can be your friend also. He can be your friend. Because mostly when we try to practice spiritual life, we find it not so easy very often, right? Like when we say chant, what is the process for this age? It's chanting, and then we sit down and we try to meditate and concentrate, and then our mind doesn't allow us to focus on what we are supposed to do, right? Trying to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And already within this just one mantra, how many times the mind went here and there and thought of so many other things. And if you start thinking about it, then it becomes even worse. How many times? What am I thinking when I'm chanting Hare Krishna? Then you don't hear any Hare, you don't hear any Krishna, you don't hear any Rama. And there's no benefit. There's no benefit. Like again, same thing. It's a very, very important message. When we were also just now in Yatra in Gokarna, we heard the story of Dundukari, who became a ghost and who had been trapped because he was so sinful. And then his brother, he came in, he was frightening and disturbing his brother. And his brother said, "Who are you? What are you doing?" And then he disclosed, "Okay, I'm your brother, I'm Dundukari." And it's like, so then he said, "I did so many shraddhas in Gaya and so many this and that." And then his brother said, "Well, nothing helped. I'm so single, nothing helped. So what else can we do? Okay, now let's hear Srimad Bhagavatam." And then he started hearing. And then it has been stated that so many people have heard Srimad Bhagavatam narration. But at that point, only that Dundukari, because he was suffering really for so long time. There was no relief for him. And then he understood that it is my now only hope, hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam. And then he heard the Srimad Bhagavatam and he became liberated. But everybody else heard. They got benefit, but they didn't become liberated. So how is it? So many people have been present, like so many are present here. But are we deriving same benefit? Not necessary. Not necessary. Depends how we are focused. So what is our focus? To that extent we get the benefit. To which extent, Srila Prabhupada points out that one's advancement in spiritual life depends on the attitude of a follower. So what's our attitude? Do we appreciate what are we exposed to, or what are we supposed to do? Or we don't, or our mind is somewhere else. So it is so essential that we are focused, that we are conscious on what we are doing when we practice spiritual life. And to that extent we get the benefit. Like that story of Ramanujacharya. He was passing by the river and he threw some of his Mahaprasadam in the river, and the fish who ate became instantly liberated. And the disciples wonder, they were like in awe and they were shocked. They said, "How is this possible? We ate these remnants of Mahaprasadam. How come this fish became liberated? We didn't." And then Ramanujacharya replied, it's not the same, you commit many offenses also. You're not conscious, but fish just doesn't, they're just they don't commit any offenses and they just receive that mercy, they become liberated. So it depends on the state of consciousness. And how come again that there's so many, there is one interesting, since I mentioned the fish, there is an interesting argument how, anyway, Jain religion became spread. That it was manifested in Vishnu Purana from the back of the Lord to bewilder the demons and to dissuade them from practicing the Vedic scriptures because they became so powerful by practicing the Varnashram Dharma, Vedic process. And then to make them weak, then Vishnu created irreligion so that they could reject the Vedas. And then he comes as a, Naga Baba, so to say, with all this paraphernalia, peacock fan and this and that, and covers his mouth also, and so forth, whatever. And then he's preaching. These Vedas are, they're not to be followed. And he gives so many arguments. And then one of the arguments is also then, if we bathe in the holy river and we are supposed to become liberated, how come fish is not liberated also already? No? So what is the answer? What is the answer? That's the argument. And then demons thought it's a very good argument. Not just this, there was a couple of others. A very interesting conversation is going on. That's I think in Padma and Vishnu, both Puranas, this is given. And demons were convinced, and they started following this so-called Dharma, which is actually Adharma. So, what is the answer? Wait a second. What is the answer? Same holy place, let's say Kumbh Mela. So many fishes there in the water. People come and bathe. And even people come and bathe, they don't get liberated, at least not instantly. So then what is the reason for it? Like we may say, chanting Hare Krishna brings liberation. And we are chanting, we are not liberated. Now what's going on? What do you think? Focus? Yes, that's what we were mentioning in the beginning. That's the whole point of discussion. Yes, consciousness. Consciousness. Are we conscious what we are doing? Many times, let's say, you eat, right? Are we conscious what we are doing? No, we just fill the belly and that's it. We don't practically nourish and honor and taste whatever we are eating, right? Especially when you're disturbed or something happens or whatever. You just fill your belly and you're, okay, that's it, let's go. You don't really get the benefit of something if you're not focused and conscious. So in the same way, when we practice like this, any kind of process, spiritual process, but we are not conscious of what we are doing, we just do it mechanically, we don't derive so much benefit. Something will be there, something will be sticking, so to say. Can you send them? But the benefit is not there, so we have to be conscious. We have to be conscious, then we'll derive far more benefit. And for that, being conscious, what is most required is peacefulness of the mind. And Krishna says, one cannot be happy whose mind is not peaceful. If one's mind is not peaceful, there's no question of happiness, no matter what one can achieve in one's life. If one mind is not peaceful, no, keep it open, it's better. We should get some air. It's good to get some air. So that's why that peacefulness comes only when your mind is your friend. But when will the mind be your friend? And when we accustom it to certain routine, to certain practice, to certain lifestyle, then the mind will adjust to it. That's why we in spiritual life have what is known as sadhana bhakti. Sadhana means regulated. Mind has to be regulated. At this time I go and sleep, this time I wake up, this time I eat, this time I meditate, this time I this, that time I that. And then mind knows, it's peaceful. Otherwise, if it's just somehow whimsical, this and that, then very disturbed. There is no schedule, the mind becomes very restless, very restless. And of course, the way we train our mind, that's like then we can start talking about habits. That's the same thing. We acquire certain habits, then this is how everything through that will be manifested in our life. So now we have to acquire new habits. Spiritual practice is a new habit. And only through that new habit one can come to the higher platform. But to do that, one can't just start with the mind itself. One has to use one's intelligence. See? It's not enough. See, if mind is not convinced, it will not take to certain practice. Many times I hear, just like yesterday, I spoke to one boy and whatever, everybody says, I know I'm going to, end up in such a bad position. I know. But then why you're not doing anything about it? Because there is no realization. Mind is not convinced. We might be intellectually convinced, but mind is not convinced yet. And why is mind not convinced? Why is mind not convinced? Because we just come to temple, not doing any particular practical service. And we don't apply the knowledge that we have acquired. So it's not good enough just to hear. Let's say I come to temple and I see the deities and I hear maybe something. It's not good enough. One has to apply. Then by application, one will gain the realization. And that realization means value. I start valuing this process because I know how good it is. I've experienced it. And that's when your mind becomes your friend. Then you don't say, or rather, Thursday evening, I will stay at home and I'll watch something. That's when your mind is your enemy. But you say, no, I will travel even if I have to change 2 buses or something, whatever. I'll come to temple and I'll just hear some Bhagavad Gita. I take some prasada. That's when your mind is your friend. If you can convince your mind like this. But that also comes and it will be retained if one engages in the service of Krishna. Then one will gain realization, one will experience that. Experience is much deeper than just intellectual understanding. Intellectual understanding is good, but it's not sufficient. Its mind is not going to be necessarily convinced. Not on the long run. So yes, knowledge is important. Intelligence is required, but there has to be application. There has to be application. Then the mind will become convinced. And then our mind will become our friend. Then mind will want kirtan. Mind will want prashadam. Mind will want devotee association. Mind will want. So because one reprograms the mind, it gives him something better. And why would mind go for something worse? Something of the lesser quality. That's all. That's what spiritual life is all about. And this is the central feature of spiritual practice, to convince the mind, to purify the mind. That's the better word. It's to purify the mind, because mind is filled with impurities and we are attached to those impurities, and therefore we are looking for the same. We are looking for same impurities. But if you purify the mind, then mind will look for something clean, for something much more beneficial for the soul, and it will become transparent medium. What is transparent medium of soul? It's a spiritual practice. It's not going to be looking for something else here and there, and everybody is looking outside for more money, to have more sense gratification and be more sinful and so forth. No, but mind becomes programmed and then becomes our friend when it gets that higher taste to bring us to Krishna consciousness. So that's why this is very, as I said, important verse. Of course, we can discuss upon mind. Quite a lot of Vedic literature deals with the mind. It's known as Vedic psychology. And there is no psychology as Vedic psychology. In Srimad Bhagavatam also there are very interesting discussions, which point to this nature of the mind. And it's very important because how often mind gives us so much trouble, right? How often mind gives us so many difficulties. And when we identify with this mind, how this person, how could he do this? And that person, how could he say this? And how this had happened? And why this? And why? And then mind, so much pressure, so much depression, so much anxiety. So mind can be actually even worse. Actually, that's why psychosomatic diseases are worse than just some kind of physical injury sometimes. It can drive one really mad. So much pain. It's incredible pain. But in this age, actually, especially in this 21st century, it's declared that the mental disease will be number 1 disease. So much stress, so much anxiety. How many promises have been given? Some 70 So then how can mind be peaceful? How can the mind take shelter of any spiritual process? It's then almost impossible. So for that reason, we have to train the mind. We have to give him something better. We have to also change the paradigms of the conceptions that how are we supposed to live, the whole lifestyle. Because if we want material lifestyle, then yes, then we will have, then there's no way out of it, first of all, and then one just glides deeper and deeper into it. But then one has to consider some other alternative, something else, which is spiritual process. And then we see how mind can become our best friend when it has a taste for coming to the temple, for performing devotional service. So then when mind is brought more closer to the mode of goodness, because that's where it belongs. That's where it originates. It's a mode of goodness. So if mind is kept peaceful, then one will also become happy. But if mind is kept agitated always by unlimited desires, or kept in ignorance, the lower modes like this, then that's just, it will create havoc. It creates havoc in one's life. So this is the formula Krishna is saying. One must deliver himself with his mind, not degrade himself. So mind is the central element, as I said, central feature of the whole yoga processes, of all spiritual practices. If we befriend the mind, then we'll be successful in any spiritual practice. If we fail, then forget it. Then there's no question of spiritual advancement. So mind has to be befriended in such a way. And sometimes, you can flatter to your mind. Sometimes you can tempt your mind. Sometimes you can bribe your mind. Whatever it works. But bringing it closer somehow towards Krishna. Because nowadays, everybody else, it's tempting and flattering and bribing the mind in completely different direction. And that's through advertisements, through media, through all kinds of prajalpa conversations with so-called friends and whatever family members and this and that. They drag our mind. Because what is it? Mind absorbs all kinds of impressions, sounds, smells, tastes, all the senses. Through all the senses, mind just absorbs all the information and then processes it, creates something completely, different kinds of impressions. And then looks for the same, thinking that, yes, I've been impressed with this, that means I have to seek for it again. And that's a big problem. So if you're exposed to material, then you look for material. But if you're exposed to spiritual, then mind will look for something spiritual. So that's why we have to be careful towards what do we expose ourselves. So it's not the mind, as we said in the beginning, it's not the mind that it's fault to be like this or to be like that, but then how do we make our mind? Yeah. So we have to deliver ourselves by our mind and not degrade ourselves by mind. So that's our choice. It's not about the mind, it's about ourselves. What do we want? But but what do we want? That's based upon some knowledge. That's based on information. And that's where also then intelligence has a very crucial role. So we have to have that information, and by fortune, this information is given to us through Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is giving now the whole science, especially this Dhyana Yoga chapter. It's going to deal with the mind. It's going to give us quite a lot of information. What is the position of the mind? So that we know how to befriend it, so that it can help us to practice spiritual life. Okay, that's in brief. Already a lot of time has passed. Any questions on this? Elevating ourselves by the mind and not degrading ourselves by the mind. So the mind is our friend, it's not our enemy. Any questions on this? Yes.
Since the mind is a material thing and the soul is spiritual, right? So
okay. Mind is material, soul is spiritual. So
how is the mind helps to deliver the soul?
How minds help? So
material thing, how can it?
Okay. Because the soul, there are different mediums that are subtle mediums to interact with the gross matter. So then that form of subtle matter, it's just like, it's that kind of medium that soul identifies. thinking that this is who I am, and therefore I can interact with this plastic table or paper or some kind of metal or something like this. So I have that conception that I'm interacting, like in a virtual reality. You put the gloves, you put the googles or something, and then it appears you're just there. You play the games or something. You're completely convinced about it. So that's it. So mind is like this. It's a medium for the soul to be able to interact with material energy.
So can you know mind?
But in essence, they don't mix. They don't become one. They don't become one. So to the extent the mind is covered, contaminated, to that extent, that's what's our perception. Like the example is given of different types of glasses. If it's red, painted red, you'll see everything painted red, right? If it's painted green, you'll see pretty much everything somewhat greenish in different shades. So what is in mind colored by? It's colored by lust, anger, greed, madness, envy. What is the degree of the coloring? What is the degree of contamination, thickness? So therefore that kind of perception of what you want to, when you want to interact with material energy, that kind of perceptions you want to receive. So soul essentially doesn't interact with matter and this mind. Soul has its own mind, which is spiritual mind. So this covering, material covering, is just absolute distraction from the original perception. But because we wanted to interact with material nature, we developed a desire, therefore that covering is necessary. So the cleaner it is, the better friend it is. We see more of the reality. The contaminated it is, the more distracting it's going to be. That's again why the whole process of spiritual life is process of purification. To purify the mind, to perceive the things more as they are rather than what they're known. Because how many times people see the same thing? They have different perception, they have different understanding, they have different conception about it. Absolutely different views. Why? It's a different contamination. But only a devotee has a pure mind can perceive what actually is as it should be. So there's no mixing, but it's just covering, and you can remove that covering. It's not necessary. You don't need that material mind. But soul already has its ego, soul already has its intelligence, soul already has its mind. Spiritual. But when we come to material world, we just, you just become covered. So it's so fine or refined, essentially, and it's so kind of pure that the soul doesn't perceive it's covered. But it becomes grosser and thicker, and as one gets entangled, one then assumes the lowest forms of the bodies and identifies with those, and becomes very gross. So one has to purify all of that, because it has nothing to do with the soul. And that's why one keeps on being trapped in this material world, growing through different species, thinking, this is who I am, and I'm a dog now, and I have to sniff and search for anything vertical and this and that. No. It's a big contamination of the mind, and because whatever one impresses in the mind, this is what it will seek to fulfill. So if one acts like a dog, as I just mentioned, the dog, then one will get doggish body. The mind attracts the form, attracts the substance. That's the science. It's not that substance creates the form. No, the form, it's just the other way around. It's the Vedic perception of science. The form already exists. And it and it invokes the substance. So from subtle, gross manifests. Gross exists, but it's manifested through the subtle. That's why ethereal element, how the ether, how all of this information, technology, how do you get through ether transmission of sound, form, color, whatever, It's already there in the ether. It's already there in the subtle. Is that okay? Yeah.
So soul is a superior energy and the mind is an inferior, right?
Yes, soul is superior, mind is inferior. I'm just repeating.
Soul has on its false ego, on its mind.
Yes.
Mind and
Yes. Soul doesn't have false ego. Soul has real ego. I'm the spirit soul, the servant of Krishna. Yes.
Right. So,
But false ego, it's identify. I'm born of material energy. That's a false ego. I don't understand I'm spiritual. I think I'm material. Anything. That's a false ego.
So by removing these coverings,
By removing this, yeah.
Right. Then when the Prabhupada is just put away from the mind, then we should act according to like this trend of like become a like good friend. Like,
Yeah, so all this contamination has to go. Then mind becomes the friend. But even that friend also ultimately has to go. Any covering has to go. It's not required. But at least it will be friendly at the point of view when we start practicing spiritual process and the mind likes to do it. It's all about liking to do. Why we are doing anything in life? Why are you doing anything in life? Because you have some inclination, you have some liking, no? You have some attraction towards it. So you cannot start liking spiritual process unless you become part of that spiritual process, unless you engage yourself, involve yourself. You may to some extent have some intellectual appreciation, but it's not going to be good enough, because if mind is conditioned and contaminated with something else, it will drag you there. That's like I said, somebody, you say, don't get married, don't get involved, but if there is no experience, spiritual experience, there's no spiritual Shakti that is generated through that experience, then even if one knows that something is not good, one will still be carried away. Because mind is somewhere else. And one doesn't have that conviction yet. And that's very unfortunate. I was just thinking, I said today, it's just the analogy of, when mind like this, it's not convinced yet, and you're going to it's like the example of Agasura, if you know the story, the demon Aga. No? Agasura story? Big serpent who, when you yawn, then your mouth is like Agasura and you want to swallow all the devotees, if you don't put your hand on. So it's like Agasura, his mouth was so wide open that it looked like a big dark cave, right? Big cave with a very interesting entrance, right? So coward boys, they're looking for fun and they want to play at different places. So they thought, wow, look at this, such an amazing sight and the formation and everything. Let's go, let's play inside such a big cave. Such a wonderful place, no? And Krishna knew what they're doing. They're entering Agasura's mouth. So it's such a great demon. He wants to kill them. He wants to swallow them all. No? And they entered being confident and whatever might happen. But Krishna is there with us, so there was no fear. Whenever Krishna is with you, there is no fear. That's okay. But they were entering Agasura's mouth. Yeah? So we are entering with ignorance, without Krishna. We enter Agasura's mouth. We enter a deep, dark cave. We enter a deep, dark cave, and then what happens in deep, dark cave? There's so much ignorance. We don't know what will happen. There's so much anxiety, so much darkness. And the deeper you go, the more difficult to come out it becomes, right? And you might never come out. So it's like this, when our mind drags us somewhere, in ignorance actually, and without taste for something that is substantial, something that is positive, like spiritual practice, then even though we might know, yes, there is something might be dangerous. Like I heard when I was in Brazil, there are some caves, they say that there is no end to it. And then sometimes they think it's like Kumbhakarna's caves where they were digging gold and there was connection between Brazil and Lanka, and so they have sent so many expeditions and they couldn't find the end, and they got scared. They discontinued, the search, and they don't know where it goes. It might go down to Patala Loka. Who knows where it might be, where a connection might go. And it's like, who knows? And then they speak about aliens, this and that. Yeah, well, there's so many demon type of species down in lower planetary systems. What is going on? And then the government is guarding that, so nobody transgresses or whatever. There's so many things. So like this, it's a deep dark cave. We're entering into so much darkness, into so much illusion. If there is no Krishna, and then definitely there is no Krishna, because Krishna wouldn't recommend us to do anything like this. That's another thing. That's another thing. Why getting entrapped and lost in that kind of darkness? So, tell him that I'll come out. So that's why we have to make mind our friend by involving him in spiritual practice, giving that taste. I remember when I started practicing Krishna consciousness, well, I didn't like some things, because the background I was coming from was completely different. I was like having a hard time relating to certain parts of the Krishna consciousness practice. Like, I don't know, okay, bhajan, music, kirtan and stuff. That was something very different that I was exposed earlier towards. But I like philosophy. When I heard, when I read the first book, I just said, wow, that's it. It's like, whoa, my mind was like, wow, I've never, this is incredible knowledge. And of course, I like prasadam. Then you slowly start cultivating the taste, the higher taste. And then you gain more and more taste for everything else. And then you lose your taste. I can't imagine nowadays, believe me, I'll rather fast whole day eating nothing than, like sometimes in the plane they serve the meals or something. I'll never touch this. I wouldn't touch, even if it's vegetarian, whatever. I wouldn't touch that. Because it's not prasadam. And you may say, okay, I offer, in emergency case or something, maybe, okay, whatever. But generally, I'll rather fast. It's not prasadam. And why should I eat any of that? No matter what it is. Actually, they can't even make it like devotees make prasadam. That's another thing. Can't be better. There's no way. No way. So that's a higher taste. You don't need some garbage outside, whatever, I say. That's what it is. It's not prasadam. So once you get higher taste, we're already talking about taste, so let's talk about prasadam. When you get prasadam, why would you be interested in anything else? How many times devotees struggle, I work, I have to get some tiffin and something, right? How to arrange for daily this and that, and it's like, then they may compromise and eat all kinds of things. It's not good for consciousness. It's not good for, as a karma even, it's not good to send. But if one really has a higher taste, he won't be even, he couldn't conceive of eating anything that is not prasadam. And actually we see that those who are sincere, there's always that some arrangement can be made. It's possible. It's not difficult at all. Many times I was also, sometimes I have some intense traveling periods when I go abroad somewhere here and there, and it's like, and it's tapasya. It's really difficult. Where am I going to, eat, stay? Sometimes I have no idea. And by Krishna's arrangement, somehow or other, everything, somehow things, it's manifest. But we don't compromise. Sometimes we hear, like you hear, just recently, like Tapan Prabhu told me, you went to UK, right? And then you were eating, what was that? I think there was some impression you told me.
ISKCON?
No, you were, like your eating habits, you were able to manage something.
Yeah.
So no compromise, or like Ramanujan, for example, he went to UK, he didn't compromise. He remained vegetarian, it's like he was like really strict. So like this, devotees, they remain only Krishnatarian, meaning eating only prasad, only things offered to Krishna. And everything can be worked out. Like I remember there was one devotee, Srila Prabhupada sent him to Russia during the communist time. And I said, Prabhupada, what will I eat there? There's nothing to eat. It's only meat, and it's like this like what will I eat there? It's like, of course, Prabhupada was, he there's an instruction, but he says it doesn't matter. You eat meat, but you go and preach as a higher principle. But of course, it wasn't like this. When he came, then they worked out. They managed. Because at that time, the economy, whatever it was, they were practically, they said they were entered the stores and the shelves were empty. It's not much of the items and things that one could purchase and get or whatever. But they went, and then Krishna made the arrangements. And devotees had nice prasad. So many things. So that's what, when one surrenders, everything is possible. So that is what is required to control the mind, to befriend the mind. somehow or other surrendering. Many times the problem is we don't have that faith again because we don't have realization. So it does, yes, in spiritual life it takes some time that we gain that realization. It takes some time. But we have to remain in devotee association. And we have to become engaged so that we gain that realization. Then mind will become our friend, and then mind won't drag us, Sometimes, yes, mind will tempt us. Mind will say, oh, look at that garbage you did before. Why not trying again? And you say, my dear mind, don't force me to give you a certain type of treatment now. Why do you want to look at that garbage? Why not take into something much more nicer? Because like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, he said that actually every day in one sense we have to treat the mind in a certain way. If it's rebellious, if it's not cooperative. He said morning time, 100 times beat him with the jaru, and evening time, 100 times you beat him with the shoes. What does that mean? That means spiritual program. That means chanting Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. You give the mind spiritual practice. And then it also becomes subdued, it becomes trained, it becomes peaceful, cooperative. So that has to be done. Sometimes little stronger treatment, and sometimes some nice taste that he becomes attracted for that higher taste. Then mind will become our friend. It's okay. So we should not allow our mind to drag us into deep, dark cave of ignorance. That's something. Keep that in the mind. Should be very careful. Okay, any other comment, question on this? Because it's already time is pretty much.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Prabhuji, my obeisance, Prabhuji, I've got a doubt that
Get to the point.
If we are to leave the mind behind when we leave the body, then how to cope the fear that one shall not have the right mind or intelligence to understand Krishna in his next body?
Who are you? How? What?
Prabhuji, I have a doubt wherein if we are to leave the mind behind when we leave the body, then how to curb the fear that one shall not have the right mind or intelligence to understand Krishna in his next body.
Yeah, but that won't depend so much upon you. At that moment, that depends what you're doing right now. So Krishna says if one is practicing spiritual life whole life and is trying sincerely, even if he's not ready at that point to really remember Krishna, Krishna will make us remembering him. But at least we should struggle, we should try that now. So even if you don't become successful, Krishna will help us. So what you're doing now, are you trying to become successful or are you wasting time? Based on that, you will know what will happen when you'll have to leave the body. And that mind is going to carry you somewhere else. So that's why we try to follow Krishna's instructions as much as possible.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay, let's read some commentaries here. Let's see. Let's try to complete. It's not going to happen.
Prabhuji, there are a few questions on the chat box.
Yeah, well, but then when will we finish the commentary? Yeah, next time it's test. We are postponing this test already too long. It's already 45.
Yeah, after this chapter, we'll have more clarity.
Sumi, Tade, you send me an email or something. We'll discuss that. Okay, let's read the commentaries. Vishwanath Chakravarti, Sagar first. Patafat. Okay, maybe. Okay, Madhvacharya, you get the summary?
Yeah.
Vikan, you want to read something?
Should I just take the summary?
Okay, you take Ramanuja's? Ramanuja, just give the summary essence. You can start reading Vishwanath and
Commentary.
Harigor, you get Sridhar Swami. Who's going to take Keshav Kashmiri? Okay, just get the summary, give the essence like in few sentences.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Shri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur commentary. Since the soul has fallen into the well of samsara by attachment of objects of the senses, with effort one should deliver that soul. One should deliver the soul, Atmana, by the mind, which is devoid of attachment objects of the senses. Atmana. One should not let the soul fall into the well of samsara by the mind, which is attached to objects of the senses. Therefore, the mind, Atma, is both the friend and the enemy of the soul. So basically, here it is saying that this whole world is like a well. We are into that, but we should try to realize oneself, to go towards self-realization. If we have got this body, we should try to engage our minds in such activities where we can realize who we are and what's our position.
Get out of the way.
Yes, get out of the well. And here it is saying like the word Atma is referring to two things. One is the soul, and one is the mind. Both things, like it is knowledgeable.
Okay. Hare
Hare Krishna.
Krishna. Ready?
The grammar only actually 6.4 is given, they are not even 6.5.
Are you sure?
Yeah, it's repeat, I just checked.
What an excuse. Okay, Sridhar Swami, who is Sridhar Swami? Sridhar Swami, Haribo. So, yeah.
The question may be raised regarding the type of person, what type of person is the mind a friend, and to what type of person is the mind an enemy. Lord Krishna answers a living being who by spiritual intelligence and diligent effort has conquered and brought under control the aggregate of the physical body, senses and the mind. To this being only the mind can be considered as a friend, and as a person following a uncontrolled mind is adverse to their best interest and is harmful, and hence the mind is like an enemy. So the person who's in spiritual intelligence, for him the mind can be a friend, whereas a person who's exposed to material things, for him is going to be an enemy.
Okay, so material means exploiting material energy, spiritual means engaging material energy for Krishna's pleasure. So where we place our mind, that's what kind of reaction we're going to get. Okay, Madhvacharya. Don't have it here. Yeah, give the essence.
So I will mention the important things. In the Brahma Vaivarta Puran, it's stated that the condition of the mind is the sole reason for human beings to be liberated from the material existence, or contrarily, incarcerated in the material existence. The mind should be elevated. The mind should be elevated. Elevate a human being and not to be a source of delusion and distress, for the mind has the propensity to be the best friend or the worst enemy. Of this there is no doubt. When with diligence and determination the mind is well governed, it's like a best friend, and then there are no other enemies. So we can see there are so many educated people right now, and then they know the cons, they know the problem if they smoke cigarette, but because they cannot control their mind, their intelligence already has this information that if I smoke this cigarette, it's going to cause me cancer. But because these people are not able to control their urge, and it's after a while the nicotine in the body is not doing anything, because the body is on the physical level, their body is already become immune to that substance. So what is that thing which is making them crave again and again? It's the mind. Like my mind wants to see the smoke again, and like literally the tobacco is not doing anything. So this is what happens to the people who are not able to control their mind. On the other hand, like we have seen people who leave behind their bad habits only because they are able to conquer their mind. And the second last line is very interesting, which says, but even so, that's why one's mind should be regulated. And Madhvacharya has put a very interesting point when it comes to regulating something. So we can see so many people have so much control, like they are vegans and they are not eating meat or they are not smoking cigarette, but yet they are not devotees. So that this line says, but even so, if the mind is not directed toward the devotion to the Supreme Lord, it is not likely to be helpful in the same way as having a servant who does no work, like not having a servant at all. And soon, mind will become antagonist to restraint and then an enemy. So basically, we can see there are so many people who are able to, like, some of the preachers out there, they spiritual leaders, they will tell you, they will teach you how to control mind, but they will not teach you how to direct the mind. And the mind which is not directed towards devotional service, today or tomorrow, like it will try to do some mischief. And yeah, and the summation has very interesting point. Like, so when I read it in the afternoon, like here begins: the individual consciousness elevates itself by the mercy of the ultimate consciousness. Lord Krishna is perpetually the best friend and well-wisher of the righteous and spiritual beings, but as perpetual enemy to the perpetrators of evil and unrighteousness. This means that to one who is devoted to the Supreme Lord Krishna or any of his authorized incarnation, the mind acts as a dear friend by his grace. But for others, the mind is like an enemy. In the end of the verse, it is indicated that the Supreme Being aids within such a person. So here we can see that it's like, even if you think that it's solely your mind and like you have complete freedom over what your mind is suggesting you or giving you instructions, it's not like that. So when I read this first time, like I was a little confused, thinking that like, okay, there is like ultimate consciousness which is also promoting. Then I remembered the example of Duryodhana, and Duryodhana once sat in front of Krishna and he told me, like, I know you are the Supreme Personality, but I'm not able to stop it. Like, I'm not able to stop my whimsical behavior. And it was only happening because Krishna did not allow him to surrender, because Krishna wanted to set an example, because Duryodhana had done so many bad things towards Pandavas, Draupadi, and because these people were devotees, Krishna wanted to teach him a lesson. So we can see how this ultimate consciousness also affects our consciousness.
Whom is the mind and enemy. Lord Krishna clarifies that mind is a friend to that person who is having complete control over the physical body and senses, and the mind has conquered their lower nature. The mind is the enemy to the person who is unable to control the physical body, senses, and a mind, due to not having conquered their lower nature, as it is stated by the sage Parasara, man's mentality is rarely the root cause of either their liberation or the bondage. The mind obeys with the sensual pleasure is a bondage where the mind, devoid of the desire to enjoy sensual pleasure, leads to moksha or liberation from this material existence.
Okay, we have less than 5 minutes for Prabhupada's comment. The word Atma denotes body, mind, and soul depending upon different circumstances. In the yoga system, the mind and the conditioned soul are especially important. Since the mind is the central point of yoga practice, Atma refers to the mind. Here, the purpose of the yoga system is to control the mind and draw it away from attachment to sense object. It is stressed herein that the mind must be so trained that it can deliver the conditioned soul from the mire of nations. In material existence, one is subjugated to influence of the mind and the senses. In fact, the pure soul is entangled in the material world because the mind is involved with a false ego, which desires to lord it over material nature. Therefore, the mind should be trained so that it will not be attracted by glitter of material nature, and in this way, the conditioned soul may be saved. One should not degrade oneself by attraction to sense objects. The more one is attracted by sense object, the more one becomes entangled in material existence. So that's how we have to train the mind. Train the mind to be attracted by Krishna and everything in relationship to Krishna, rather than those things which are taking us away from him. The best way to disentangle oneself is to always engage the mind in Krishna consciousness. The word he is used for emphasizing this point, that one must do this. It is also said, Mana eva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayo bandhaya vishaya sango muktyai nivishaya manaha. For man, mind is the cause of bondage, and mind is the cause of liberation. Mind absorbed in the sense object is the cause of bondage, and mind detached from sense object is the cause of liberation. Atma Bindu Upanishad. Therefore, the mind, which is always engaged in Krishna consciousness, is the cause of supreme liberation. So to summarize within a minute, mind can be the best friend and the worst enemy depending on what is reposed upon. What do we feed him with? Like we have that story, what do you feed, the bad dog or the good dog? Which one's going to prevail? That's it. That's what we're going to get. So if we feed the mind with very negative, sinful kinds of activities and things, that's what it's going to keep on demanding. But if you're giving Krishna consciousness, then it will seek for the same and will achieve pleasure and liberation simultaneously. Okay, Hare Krishna will end here. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Prabhupada ki jai, Prabhupada